Welcome back to our Thursday debate. I am not Adam Preston. Adam Preston is still not here. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but he got pregnant. Now he's in a little small community in the mountains with older men in a similar situation. Now, with me today are two congressmen, Congressman Pizzuto. Good to have you on the show.
Hey, I really appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
And Congressman Ward. Nice to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So there's been a flurry of bills being added right near the start of the session, and most notably, I think, and this will be a big part of the debate, a lot of them had to do with health care. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Most of them had to do with health care, and there are varying viewpoints, all the way from scrapping the current health care to creating a single-payer system. So kind of your first question, and I'll go to Congressman Pizzuto first, and then we'll hear a rebuttal from Congressman Ward on how you see the issue of health care and how you think it could be solved.
Well, I don't think it's any surprise that our healthcare system is a disaster, made worse by the horrific entitlement known as Obamacare, passed in the dead of night by Democrats who had not read it. It's really no surprise. What government sees, government wrecks. What government wrecks, it wants to fix, and in the process, it eliminates all of our rights. I'm definitely for a free market, frankly, when it comes to healthcare, and I've got a couple reforms I'd like to see, but I'll give Representative Ward a chance to rebut if he wants.
Congressman Ward?
Well, I think for one, we have to start with the fact of we don't have any bipartisan effort to fix what we have. I mean, we can sit here all night and say, oh, Obamacare did this and Obamacare did that, but it works if you work it, for lack of a better term. We haven't even had a chance to see if it even works, and the the lack of cooperation isn't going to get us anywhere.
It's not so much that I would rule out the lack of cooperation if there was something there, if the foundational pieces were appropriate. But what you're asking us to help work on is essentially a submarine with a screen door. There's no point in working on it if the entire foundation of the plan, I'd call it a scheme, if the entire foundation of the plan is really a problem. So I'd like to see us bring free market enterprise to it. I guess what I'd ask is this. If Obamacare worked, if it worked philosophically, why don't we do that with everything? Why don't we do that with food? Why don't we do that with clothing? Why don't we do that across the board? These are all important things like healthcare. Is why do we rely on the free market to do things like allow us to, say, go down to a grocery store where there's 50 versions of orange juice, but we have to have government-run healthcare? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, I think what we have to keep in mind is that the system was broken before Obamacare got there. I mean, long before Obamacare was put in, we had people who couldn't afford their hospital bills, couldn't afford to even stay in the hospital. And my wife just went through a bout of pneumonia where without insurance, we would be looking at bankruptcy. And luckily we have good insurance, but that's not the case for every American. And yeah, I understand there does need to be some aspects of free market. I think the exchange is a good thing where we say, hey, if you can get health care through your employer on your own, that's great. But if you can't, or if your employer doesn't offer that, or if it's way too expensive, then we do offer some sort of subsidy for that. I think a healthy society is a good society. And I don't think Republicans disagree on that. I think they want to see healthy people. I'm not going to swing so far to the left to say, oh, they just want to see people die. That's silly talk. But what we do have to keep in mind is that just because we there's an aspect of affordability. And the reason we don't do things like that with clothes or with food is that there's already adequate food for people, and sometimes they need subsidy. There are access to clothes, and by the good graces of the people, we have things like Goodwill and Helping Hands and things like that, where they can afford to get clothes if they need to. So it's all about saying, yes, there's access, but is there opportunity that we need to focus on?
Well, I mean, I guess first off, I'd like to say that I think Representative Ward is coming at this from a very different place than your Nancy Pelosi's and your Harry Reid's came from this back when Obamacare was passed. So I do want to note that that's a really important distinction, and I'm glad that the Democrat Party has sort of changed its militancy on this particular issue. What I would say is that the reason why food isn't expensive, the reason why I could go down to a dollar store tomorrow and pick up a can of peas for 99 cents or some low cost food items like that, is because we've got a free market in place that is as free as, I mean, it's not as free as I'd like to see it, believe me, but we've got a free market in place that lets the market determine the cost of these goods. And services would work in a very similar way. So, I get that it's going to be very difficult to scrap it all at once, though I'd like to do that. But I guess what I'd like to say is, or I guess what I'd like to discuss is reforms that could be made, and see if maybe there's somewhere where Representative Ward and I can agree. But I will say fundamentally, I'm not even sure Obamacare was designed to succeed. And I think that's why it's become broken so fast. And I wonder if, I doubt he'd concur with that, but I wonder where he stands on that.
So, Congressman Ward, you say, oh, sorry. So you say you go from a slightly further center than, say, Representative Gonzalez, who submitted a bill that would give a single-payer system. So that would be the far extreme. So if not that, then I guess the question would be, what exactly would you support?
What I would like to see is to take what Obamacare did with the exchanges, with the individual mandate, and improve from there. I don't think it was a perfect bill. I do think it was rushed through. I think we needed to take more time to have a good and healthy and bipartisan debate and bill where we say, okay, I can't get everything I want, you can't get everything you want, but what do we want? What can we keep? Where can we meet in the middle? I think the exchanges with the states being able to give a subsidy for that and that going to the state is a good thing. I think the individual mandate is a necessary thing. And I understand people saying, well, it's cheaper for me to take the penalty. Okay, then take the penalty. That's okay. We don't want to charge people outside of their means. If it's cheaper for you to take the penalty, then by all means do what is most cost effective for you. I'd like to see an improvement. Now, what I will say about the single payer system is it is at least a solution. It is at least something that has been offered up. Now, I know Pizzuto is going to say that he's got ideas for reform, and I'm open to hear that. That's healthy, and that's good, because that's at least a start. If you look on my social media and my press releases, one of the things that I've been pressing is the quote, "Where's the bill?" And, it's from the old Wendy's commercial, "Where's the beef?" Well, where's the bill? I mean, you have all these great ideas. Where's the bill? And if Pizzuto's got reforms, I'll be interested to take a look at them. I've co-sponsored bills from the Republican side because I think they're going to work, because I think they're going to be beneficial to the American people. I'm not going to be some sort of far left, always say no Democrat. That's not what we're after. It's about helping the American people. So if he's got reform ideas, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I guess I want to kind of attack this in a couple different ways. First off, I've got a big problem philosophically with an individual mandate that essentially says we're going to force you to break the law or force you to buy a good or service that you don't want. You wouldn't. It would be. It's very rare in America to find a scenario where we would do that in sort of any other way. Okay, if you know. If I lived next door to Representative Ward and all of us in his neighborhood decided he needed to have a fence that looked just like ours, it would be pretty ballsy of us to force Representative Ward to buy a fence or punish him by paying a tax. It turns everyone into either a lawbreaker. Well, I guess what I'd say is it turns everyone who can't afford it into a lawbreaker, and I've got a fundamental problem with that. And when it comes to things like criminal justice reform, which we can talk about, if we took this away from healthcare and just kind of philosophically looked at like we've got a kind of prison system that's overburdened. In any other issue, Representative Ward and his party would agree with me, but on this, they don't, and I don't understand why. The second bit I want to talk about really quick is these exchanges. A lot of these exchanges are going broke. A lot of these exchanges have fallen apart. A lot of these exchanges don't work, and I think, again, it's because the system itself wasn't designed to work. And I have a real problem with a bill that I think was rushed, that wasn't designed to work. And I actually think it was designed. You brought up the fact that we've got bills now in our hopper that go to single payer. Why do I have a sneaking suspicion that this was designed to get us to a point of single payer? Now, I get that all that was done before, and I'm trying not to filibuster. I get that all this was done before Representative Ward, so I want to acknowledge that I don't think he or even the party as it sits today is to blame for that. But I can't say that the party in 2008, 2009, 2010 wasn't, and I've got a big problem with that.
Well, I would say you're right on one thing. The party as it sits today is not the party of 2008. And for that reason, I think we have to, I'll probably get some slack from my colleagues on the left side of the house, but I think we have to do something called repent and repair. We agree where we go, yeah, maybe this didn't work, and maybe we were wrong, and we repair. Now, back to the single payer, is that the right way to go? I don't philosophically think so. I think that if that's what's before us, we need to have a debate on it. But again, I ask the question, where is the health bill from the Republican right? I haven't seen. The only health bills that I've seen have been to defund Planned Parenthood, which we could obviously talk about that. From there, I haven't seen a whole lot. There's been some for drug-related issues, but I don't believe, and I'd have to search the hopper just to be sure, I don't believe I've seen a let's fix this bill from the right.
Well, look, that's a perfectly valid point, that the hopper's been open for a fairly short period of time. The Democrats are a new party. We're a new Republican party. I can tell you that there have been plenty of bills since 2009 to either repeal and replace, repair, do whatever. And Democrats, and I know this is not your Democrat party, but they haven't been willing to work on that. So it's not that these things don't exist. I would be shocked if in the next couple of years you didn't see something that was pretty robust in I don't know about repair. I mean, that's going to be really difficult. Again, what you're asking Republicans for is to take something that we believe is fundamentally broken and try to gussy it up to make it workable. I don't know that that's going to exist, but I can say that I think I can guarantee we'll at least put a package in place that has a lot of the reforms on it, and I'm happy to talk about them. Ending medical malpractice boondoggles, repealing some of the HIPAA regulation leviathans, tearing down regulations, allowing really, really affluent seniors to opt out of Medicare. I mean, there's tons of things we can do, allowing health savings accounts. There's a ton of things that we can do. And if your quibble is we just haven't seen the bill yet, yeah, I mean, I think our party can own the fact we haven't put that out there yet, but we'll get that out there. And it's good to know that once we do, you're at least committed to looking at it. My worry with working together is that for Democrats, working together has always worked out really well for you all. Since Teddy Roosevelt, what working together has meant historically, and again, I just want to preface all this with saying I understand that this is a new Democrat party, so I get all that. Just know that I understand that. But you got to understand from the Republican point of view, what working together has meant since about 1913 is continuing to ratchet up government in our lives. When we win a battle, it's really just about maintaining where we're at. It's never about rolling anything back. So when you say things like, well, I'm happy to work together, I get that you see that as this really positive thing. Real, true conservatives, constitutional conservatives, we get the heebie-jeebies because what it usually means is we're not going to actually roll anything back. We're just going to try to manage the Leviathan better. And that's just not a tenable position where we are right now.
Well, I think what you can accredit that to is bad bills. And I think we can look at obviously we don't have anything in the hopper here, but the most recent attempts or the constant attempts to repeal Obamacare before it was replaced. I mean, and I know that's the big push: repeal and replace, or repeal then eventually maybe kind of replace. I think that is where we have to start. Is okay, if you're going to put something up, that's great, but it needs to be comprehensive. My fear of working together is what I've seen from the strong Republican right is that they don't believe in it. It's just about pushing the bill through. It's just about going forward. It's just about scrapping what's there, and then we hope eventually we see the bill. And even in Representative Pizzuto's statement, yeah, we'll eventually get there. Okay? When? There's at least 45 bills on the hopper, and none of them address health care. No one has put together a health care bill. They put together a seawall bill. They put together a Thin Blue Line Act. You've got Republicans talking about what kind of tuna people can eat, but not health care. So, I mean, you've got bills going on. Well, we're going to have colleges help pay students, and that's a personal thing for me because I've been such an adamant proponent of good education. But yet there's no health care bill. So I'm seeing things on immigration. I'm seeing things on tuna. I'm seeing things on seawall and NASA, but no health care bill. So
that's fine.
My concern about working together is you're going to force a bill down our throat that gets rid of something, getting rid of health care, not just for women like the Planned Parenthood bill wanted to do, but also get rid of health care for everybody, and then expect us to trust you to maybe finally one day, hopefully, when there's a blue moon and a solar eclipse, and on the same day, to get us a health care bill.
Well, on the one hand, I mean, I want to try not to dip too far into semantics here, but just for the people at home, no plan anywhere is going to get rid of health care. What we're talking about is health insurance. You're still going to be able to have health care. You're going to go to hospitals. You know, we had health care before Obamacare. We had health care before the private individual markets. So health care is going to be there. There is a question about how we pay for it. And there's a really, really fundamental question, which is, do we allow free markets to take hold, or do we warp the markets using government intervention? The left has decided that they want to use use governments to mess with the markets in ways that help certain blocks of people. And what we've said on the right is, hey, listen, if you want to talk about what we're going to quote unquote replace it with, you know, this is something that Republicans get sucked into all the time, where Democrats, they have this plan for everything that usually involves a state-sponsored solution, and it's, well, if you don't also have one that's different, then you have quote unquote nothing. You know, going back to the free market isn't nothing. Going back to the free market and enhancing the free market is not a bad thing. Now, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what we're going to propose here, but it is going to be a more free market-oriented solution, and that's not nothing. So there's some semantics I just want to make sure that we clear up.
Well, and I can agree with that. Yeah, people have access to health care just in the same way that I have access to, or, you know, when I was a student, I had access to eat at the finest restaurants in Conway, Arkansas. That doesn't mean that I can actually do it. And I think that's the fundamental breakdown. On the right is they go, well, you have access. You can do something. Well, yeah, ethereally, maybe I can, but when it comes down to can I actually sit down at the kitchen table and do it, that's a different story. And so, yeah, you have access to health care. You have access to the best doctors, but when that bill comes, are you going to have to refinance your home? Are you going to have to take a fourth job just to be able to be healthy? And I think that's the difference in free market versus a middle ground here is, number one, when we put the free market in things like commodities and services, yeah, we get great competition. When we put the free market in something as fragile as the health care of people, like people's well-being, my concern, and something that I will not do, is if a bill is going to allow access to the top rich people, the most affluent people get the best care, and the lower rung people are made to either go without or have inadequate care, that is a concern for me. I don't think a single-payer solution is going to fix that. I don't think that's the right step. What I think we do have to do is make sure, medical malpractice suit, we've got to make sure that we protect our doctors. But number two, some of that is that we have to look at the corporations that are kind of governing those healthcare prices and go, maybe it's there. And I think we've got to be open to exploring not just the insurance side, but the cost factor as well. $75 for a shot or for an IV bag is a lot. For some salt water, that's a lot of money. And I think we've got to do some steps there too.
Well, so I mean, this part is rough because I know you're not meaning to drag me into this, but again, I just want to let the folks at home know why this is a new Republican Party, because, and I'm not in any way kind of like, slamming this tactic. It's a tactic I think most people use so much they don't even know they're doing it. But I'm not going to get drug into a conversation where we start dividing people by class, by race, by whatever. I don't talk about rich people, poor people, middle class people. That whole class thing, that's Marxist terminology that I don't get into and I fully reject. So I just want to start there. I know you didn't mean it that way, but for the folks at home that understand, that want to know why I'm not going to get drug into that's because I'm not going to use the left's language to frame the debate. But let's go back for a minute. You're talking about things like access. You're talking about things like that. Okay, that's fine. Let's even concede a point about access. The question is, what is the federal government's role in all of that? So we're talking about, like, there are Medicaid programs through states. There are clinics through states. There are people that get served at hospitals via charity and money through that. The question here really is, we all work for the federal government. The question is, what is the federal government's role and responsibility? And as I sit here, I'm thumbing through my Constitution, Article 1, Article 2. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing where provide health care for every man, woman, and child, not only in this country, but if the left has their way, and I'll use the old left because I don't know what the new left's going to be, but if the old left has their way, not just every man, woman, and child in this country, but anyone that happens to walk across our border on any given day from any country in the world also now has the right to our health care. Now, I just reject all of that sort of out of hand, and I'm trying not to be like militant about it, but there comes a point philosophically where you have to wonder, what is our responsibility?
So I guess maybe the question is, because you're talking about a difference between being able to buy something and being able to afford something. which are two separate things. So, Congressman Ward, are you therefore implying that there's an innate right to health insurance or
I think what there is that there's a right to life. There's a right in America in that Constitution that says that people have the right to have a good and prosperous life. And without good, proper health care, they can't do that. Without the access to good doctors, they can't do that. Now, I think one place where we start, where we miss the healthcare, this healthcare debate, is preventative care. I think that's something that I would like to see that that let's be honest, has not come from our side either, and I will own that. I'll give that as a consolation, but it's not come from either side as of late, and so that's the place where I think we start. So what can we do for preventative health care? So let's go back. When the congressman says that that's not in the Constitution, it's not spelled out insofar as such as how to count a population, how to take a census, things like that. But it does guarantee people the right to life. It does guarantee people the right to be able to have a prosperous life. And that's something that our founders ingrained into the Constitution. And I think that looks different in different aspects. So don't hear me say that it's just like that. So in a sense, yes, we do have a right to a good life, and I think healthcare is a small aspect of that. And the access to good doctors does that, and the access to good preventative care does that. So I think to answer your question, yes, but that's a small part that I think everyone likes to blow up on both sides of the aisle, where we go, yes, but there's steps that we take to prevent and then to protect.
Well, I mean, first I'm going to make a little news and agree with my colleague here, and then, but I also need to take some issue with a couple things. So I'm going to agree with him. Our side also hasn't been that great about trying to determine what ideas might be best for preventative care. Again, I'm going to always default back to it, but is it the federal government's job? But he's right. He's right that we don't have a great system right now that helps deal with that. The second bit is I think we made some news here in that Representative Ward, who I'm going to say is at the very least maybe not the most liberal Democrat in the world, but he is a Democrat, just made news with a guarantee of the right to life. So my side will be extremely happy to hear that we've got some other folks on the aisle who are pro-life Democrats. And I would really hope that he and I can work on a bill to protect the unborn, because I think that's an amazing thing. But the third bit is there is a problem. There is a problem, which is that the right to life that he's talking about is really, I think that term comes from our Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence is not the tool we use to run our government. It's part of a system of sort of natural rights that we have, and the Constitution is there to try to tell us how the federal government will help protect in that. And so my big concern really is it the federal government's job? Even if I concede that somewhere it's government's job, that the 100% total free market can't reign. Okay, there is a place for government. The real question that I still don't think Democrats like my friend here have really answered is where is it that it's the federal government's job to do all of this? Because again, I have my little Constitution, and I'm not seeing that power given to us in Article 1 anywhere.
A couple things. Actually, the gentleman is partially correct, because the 5th and 14th Amendment do mention the right to life, liberty, and property, which originally comes from Locke, the philosopher. But it also has mentioned life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. Also, that's a lovely segue talking about life, because also in the House Hopper, there have been several bills speaking specifically about abortion. There was one that was a partial birth, born alive, one that was non-discrimination based on gender, for gender specific abortions. Um, and so I'd like to hear from both congressmen where you stand on those. You find common ground.
Let me do two things. Let me address his first point that he had in his last question, and I think that's an excellent segue. And then I'll proceed further.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm going to do two things at once. I think I'm going to shock the world, and I think I'm going to answer the question. I understand what the courts have ruled, and I think that we have to understand that piece. However, I fully, completely, as an evangelical Christian, believe that life begins at conception. I'm going to catch flack for saying that, and I know the congressman is beaming right now to hear that. But here's my promise, and this is me speaking for me. I can only speak for me in this case. I will not speak for the rest of my colleagues. If they put up a bill that will protect the unborn and have no extra fluff to it, zero fluff, zero additives, I will very, very, very closely, openly, strongly, prayerfully consider that legislation. Because I absolutely do think that the unborn are alive. They are people. They do deserve constitutional protection. I think the courts did err. I will say that was a Republican court. But
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But if so, I mean, looking at just trying to reach down the hopper, prenatal non-discrimination act, I have no problem with that. Any bill that would reduce access to abortions down to a 20-week period, I would openly consider that. My concern, and this is just a little asterisk, is if the bill is well written. And I think there was one that I had a question on of, does this section mean all of these have to be done or one of them? Can we add a statement here? You know, I want to have a good bill. And I don't want us to push through a bad bill just to get a moral point. So if there's a good bill on the table, I'll openly consider it.
Yeah, so I guess I want to start with, there's not too much I want to say here because this is a point of agreement for us, and so I don't. Let me just say this. Number one, the polls increasingly agree with Representative Ward. Okay, the science agrees with Representative Ward. Our Judeo-Christian heritage agree. This is a country for all people of all backgrounds, but we do have fundamental foundational principles this country was built on. Those agree with Representative Ward on the issues of life. So you're not going to find me taking much issue with anything he said. And just to get back to this, 83% of American adults oppose U.S. tax dollars being spent to facilitate abortions. We're at the highest level of support for the pro-life position that we've seen in the past 65 years. So this is one battle that culturally, I think, those of us who are, socially conservative, or I don't want to paint too broad a brush on this, but this is one area, along with the Second Amendment, where I actually think our side, whatever you want to call that, is actually winning this debate. And I think we're going to ultimately win this debate because eventually the far left, the radicals, are going to have to understand what Representative Ward already does, which is the science is on our side here, and more we're seeing it. The more we can see what is going on inside that woman with that baby, it's becoming more and more clear. And pretty soon, only the far left, hardcore, radical wing of the left is going to oppose us on this. So other than that, I don't have a ton to say. Of course, the bill should be a good bill. Of course, the decision was a ridiculous decision based on a right to privacy that isn't anywhere in the Constitution. So of course it was a terrible decision. And yeah, that's it. Outside of that, all I can say is that Representative Ward and I agree.
Very good. We have a tiny bit more time. So if both of you would like to comment, kind of tying that the two topics together, because one of the bills that was submitted had to do with defunding Planned Parenthood from the federal budget. So I'd like to hear from both congressmen on that.
I'll let Representative Ward go. I just took a big chunk of time.
Okay, thank you. Let me tell you how I voted, and let me tell you why. And I'll, as the minority whip, let me tell you what I've kind of told, or certainly mean to get across to other fellow Democrats. Number one, I voted to abstain in that vote because I could not, in good conscience, vote either way, and I felt that was the safest on conscience to vote that direction. And what I've encouraged on this issue, on the abortion issue, I've encouraged my fellow Democrats to very simply vote their conscience. And that's not fit our vote to the electorate. That's vote your conscience. There's not going to be any punishment from the whip's office on what people do with their conscience. I understand that it's a tough decision. I understand that it's a rough debate, and I'm sensitive to that. But let me tell you why I couldn't vote for the Planned Parenthood discussion. Because I do think that, yes, Planned Parenthood does perform abortions. However, what they also do is very helpful health care for women who can't afford it. I think that there is we have to be more diligent in monitoring where our money goes. I think we have to do a better job of understanding what access looks like. But I think when we start, the reason I couldn't vote for that bill is because I understood that bill to be an anti-abortion bill attacking health care. And again, going back to the mantra, where's the bill? I'm not going to vote for that bill because there's additional fluff going on with it. The bills that are clean, that are solid, that are concise and clear, I'll vote for those. But I couldn't go with that because of the extra fluff and the other healthcare things that were going on at the same time.
Congressman Pizzuto?
Well, I mean, look, our position here is pretty simple. We want women to have the health care that they need. And so that does mean that there's some federal funding that goes into, private healthcare, community healthcare centers, preventative screenings, all of those things, and we're fine with that. I mean, we've got some philosophical issues in the big picture, but as it relates to, like, say, Planned Parenthood, the issue with Planned Parenthood though is that it's an abortion mill. Okay, money is fungible, so it doesn't matter whether or not they take money in and try to lie to Americans and say, well, we're going to put this chunk of money is going to go towards X, and none of this chunk of money will go towards abortions. The simple fact of the matter is anyone who's run a business, Representative Ward knows this, I know this, anyone who's had any private sector experience knows that if I get, $15 million and I earmark it towards, procedure number one, I'm just going to take the money that I haven't earmarked and move it over for procedure number two. So what you've got here is you've got our American tax dollars going to fund abortion mills. It's got to stop. This is an agency, an organization that's wealthy on its own. It doesn't need this. It has this because it's been in the pocket and vice versa of the radical left in this country, and it just needs to stop. Or we need to change the rules and start doing the same thing for the NRA. So when one side's willing to do one, then maybe the other side will be willing to do the other. My philosophy tells me it should happen to neither, and on moral grounds, it certainly shouldn't happen with Planned Parenthood. So I totally believe in women's health care. It's does the money need to go to that specific organization? I believe it doesn't, and I believe we're morally obligated that it doesn't as well. So.
All right, we'll move on to parting shots here really quickly. We'll give Congressman Ward any final thoughts, anything you want to say or plug. Go for it.
A couple things that I want to say, well, one to say and one to plug. One thing that I want to say is I think that we've seen a stall in the House of bills getting pushed through. It's been a week. We've got the same 3 bills sitting out. Nothing has been debated. Nothing has been pushed through. I think that's a job on the Speaker. And I'd like to see a better push of more bills going down so we don't have this big funnel of non-debated bills so we can do our job. The other thing that I want to plug is that I have a bill on the floor, the Future Workers of America Act, that would put money into the schools, the public schools of America, to educate vocational training. I think it's a bipartisan bill. I think it's something that needs to get pushed through quickly and to help students today.
I guess for my end, I'll respond to Representative Ward first. On his first point, I certainly agree. More needs to be done. It needs to be done better, and I think it's something that just simply needs to be worked on. I haven't read the bill. Representative Ward's bill. I'm curious to do it now. I'll probably go do that this evening. Depending on what the language is, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of wiggle room here, but depending on what the language is, I think principally I agree with Representative Ward on that issue. We can have a whole debate some other time about whether the federal government should be involved in that in the education system, but I'll leave that aside. But based on what I see, I don't philosophically have a problem with that. And then my last little plug is going to be, what I'm hoping to bring to this party and what I hope happens as vice chair of this party is that we become the true sort of eye of the storm, the epicenter of personal liberty and freedom in this country. And as many folks, libertarians, clear-thinking Democrats, as many people that want to join sort of the individual rights, pro-liberty side of the aisle on these issues, my door's always open. I'm happy to talk. I'm always happy to try to work on anything that can advance that agenda.
All right. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ward.
Thank you, sir.
Capitol Hill is a free online government simulation game you can play as a congressman, and it's really fun. If you haven't joined us yet, but you love listening, you can come join us. We're on TedderVision.com. Thank you and good night.